I am wearing my SOS, Silence of Suicide, a purple hoodie. Although my friend did say she was deeply concerned when I was wearing a hoodie in purple because she associated it with death, which I didn't think was probably appropriate when I was skydiving. But nonetheless, I'm wearing this for two reasons. One, obviously, because I'm supporting the charity and I just did the skydive and they gave me for free and I'm Northern. So if it's free, it's going to get warm. But also because a lot of you who come here are interested in mental health. Some of you are interested in careers in mental health. Some of you are people who have this inkling that they might want to be therapists, and Silence of Suicide, SOS Charity, is looking for volunteers who can work on the helpline. They are absolutely inundated with calls. I know you guys will understand that. And they are looking for volunteers who can work from home. They sort it all out for you. They do your training. They're not interested whether you've had past history of mental health. They accept that people with lots of different issues can bring lots to the table. And they're also not concerned about if you've had any training or experience before. They can do that. They also are not like the Samaritans. Not that I have anything against what the Samaritans do, but I'm sure that a lot of you will know that when you train as a Samaritan, you're a listener. You're more there to kind of hear the person. And with Silence for Suicide, it's more conversational. So it will be more about you actually having a conversation, safeguarding that person, and hopefully doing a little bit of what I do. So kind of doing some problem solving with them. So if that is something that you would like to do, you can get in touch with SOS. They're desperate for volunteers. I know that some of you will be excited to do that kind of work. Volunteering is known to make those who volunteer feel happier about their lives as well, because you have an impact on the world and the world has an impact back on you. That's what I would say. Also, thank you so much for all the support for the skydive. We raised a lot of money and I got to throw myself out of a plane without any responsibility. It was amazing. If any of you want to set yourself a goal, it would be really good to do a skydive, even if you're scared of heights, because honestly, you don't think of any of that. All that you know is that there's some guy or woman behind you strapping you to them, and then you just kind of fall out of a plane. And I'm going to be really honest, I thought it would be like going on a Big Dipper and just like screaming. You know that feeling when you just like your stomach drops? Didn't have any of it. Most I thought was, bloody hell, clouds are really cold. Clouds are really cold, guys. No one tells you that, do they? No one tells you that when you fly through a cloud, you're going to get hit with ice, literally. Those things are a lot more aggressive than you would believe. But it was a great day and it felt normal and everyone was sat outside. And even though I did get into a row with the receptionist because I don't wear a mask for my reasons, the point is it still went ahead in spite of that issue where she was saying that I might not be mentally fit because of the fact that I don't wear a mask. And we won't go into it, but the chief instructor allowed me to do the jump in spite of that. Isn't it weird how people think that they've got a right to ask you about your medical issues or your psychological issues? It's like, when did that become a thing? When did it become a thing that you get to ask me about that stuff? Stop it. Back off. Anyway, she was having one of those days. The consequence was that she put me right to the back of the queue. So I don't know who won the argument. I think it was 50-50, wasn't it? It's like I got to do what I said and she got to put me to the back of the queue, which meant I waited all day to do it. I nearly missed it because of the weather. But never mind. Thus is conflict. Hi everybody, nice to see you. I'll start the session now. As obviously those of you who've joined, I was saying that we've not had my intro today because I'm going through Zoom just to make sure it's safe and stable whilst Wirecast gets sorted out. Also, thanks for those of you following me on my crime channel. It's really good fun and my subs are going up and it's really nice to see people actually watching my content. So cheers. Other reminder as well, obviously my app's out. If you've not got it yet, Appy, go over, get it. It's free. You'll find something on there that will be good for you. Hi Emma, do you have any advice on how to deal with stress and anxiety? It comes out of nowhere at times and I get really irritable. The only thing I find helps my stress and anxiety is to clean, but that's becoming unhealthy. And I find myself wanting to clean all the time to take my mind off it. I recently had a termination, not because I wanted to, but because I knew it was the best thing to do. I already had a 4-year-old with additional needs, but I'm finding it hard to cope with the trauma of going through that. So there's a few different issues there. So one is that reaction to trauma. Having a termination can be one of the most emotionally draining experiences of your life. I don't think that we talk about it enough, and I certainly don't think that we necessarily tell women of the feelings that they are going to experience post-abortion. It is really distressing for lots of people who think that they're going to be okay. And the problem that you have is you were on the fence. So you didn't have the termination because you wanted the termination. You had the termination because you felt that you should have the termination. So we've got a whole heap of different feelings there. One, you have a child with additional needs, but also you know what it's like to love passionately that child. Secondly, you didn't necessarily actually not want the child. So therefore you're grieving. And on top of that, you don't necessarily feel entitled to those feelings because you made a choice to terminate. So then it makes you feel like you don't have a right to those feelings, even though you absolutely do. To be in that situation is unenviable and very challenging. And I think that's why we should have trauma therapy for people who go through terminations and then find themselves finding it very, very difficult. I would certainly suggest that you go and see your GP and get on a waiting list. And the reason for that is also because you started to talk about, and I can't diagnose you, obviously, that's not what I'm here to do. But certainly when you're starting to say that cleaning is becoming a big fixation in your world, it's soothing you, but it also feels like it's turning to a compulsion to avoid a feeling of going through all of those unnecessary feelings that you put yourself through when you feel present with them. So you're trying to displace the way that you feel emotionally by projecting onto the cleaning, but now you've noticed that that might become a negative habit. And we could look at things like the beginnings of OCD, particularly with cleaning behaviour. Again, can't diagnose you, I'm just saying it in the context of those are symptomatic of what we would expect to see. And you don't want to get into that kind of ritualistic experience where it becomes so important that you kind of lose its use, which at the moment is soothing and putting you into a state of flow and distraction, and it becomes a problem where it actually additionalizes that anxiety. So I'm not going to say stop cleaning, because at some point that is obviously working for you and on some level it's having a really positive impact. But you have to balance that. You have to be quite tight around the areas and times that you make a decision to clean. So I wouldn't be wanting to do that for more than a couple of hours a day, because even that is kind of excessive with respect. I mean, an hour a day, I think, is what most of us crave to be able to clean, and lots of us don't ever achieve it. I certainly don't. My husband maybe does. But the point is, a couple of hours is a lot of time. But that state of flow that you experience during that time is probably quite positive and healthy. But then you have to be really boundaried, because what you're doing is you're not feeling the feelings because they're difficult to manage. Whereas actually what we want to do with a feeling is we want to use it as a prompt. It's there to inform us. Feelings are always there to inform us. I think that it can be really challenging to sit with grief or loss or sadness or shame. All of these feelings are big feelings, but they're there to be heard. If you don't allow that feeling to have volume, it will find a way to scream at you. Whereas instead, if we just allow ourselves to be present and to feel the uncomfortable experience of feelings like anxiety, then we find what it is it's trying to teach us. So when it comes down to your high anxiety state, we want calm, we want soothing. So arguably it would be things like a meditation stream, some yoga, going out with nature and spend 15-20 minutes gardening. That could be something that would really help you, an informal type of practice as well as the formalized yoga. But on top of that, getting outside and just walking with nature, just really connecting with the here and now. When you've got anxiety, you really want to stop worrying about the future and fearing the past, because that's what really winds it up. All you have is now. And even though those uncomfortable feelings exist, they're there to inform you. They're not there to harm you. But you need to have, as I said, that amplification, that volume on them, so that you can kind of articulate to yourself, okay, what is this here to teach me? And right now it sounds like you've had a lot of stress. You also have stress in your life with a child with additional needs. You've been through a really long period of lockdown. You've gone through a termination. And at this moment in time, you've probably not had the resources available to socialize, to get out and meet other people, to have those coping strategies and tools that you'd usually have. So now it's about building those up. What can you do with that time instead of cleaning? Can you connect with friends? Can you join some groups? Is there a way that you can take some meditation classes or yoga classes? Things that just arguably work with those feelings that you're experiencing in a really positive way and help to desensitize them and also kind of allow you just the space and time to relax. I have loads of free meditation on my YouTube channel. Even though it's a crime channel, it also has loads of things like hypnobirthing and meditation. So go over there and have a look at that, listen to those streams. And also when it comes down to the termination, I really think that you need to express that to somebody. I think probably it would be helpful to you go and get on a waiting list for therapy, particularly with those cleaning habits as well. Prevention is better than cure, isn't it? We don't want to get to a stage where we become really obsessive about that stuff. So the more that you can actually deal with the symptoms now, the better it will be. And you can even check it out. You know, OCD UK is a really good resource, and Anxiety UK is a really good resource. You can kind of look on there and have a look at whether you feel that your symptoms match some of those checklists. So just go over and look at the advice that they give you as well. But certainly try to bring in some mindful practice to your daily routine. And also the classic thing that I would say is drop the guilt about the termination. It's horrible that you've had to go through that. It's really, really painful. It's distressing and it feels so personal. Whilst millions of women have them, it just feels so unique to you as an individual who goes through it. And you have to mourn it because it was a baby that you may have wanted but couldn't have. And that's one of the most profound losses that I think a woman can go through. I really do. I think we make abortion seem like it's just this really simple thing and it's inconsequential, and it's quite the contrary in my experience. And certainly I would say that people who are in a position where they have to make those decisions are in one of the most terrible decision-making processes that they'll ever go through. It's awful. Hi Emma, in March my son was removed from me by the police and Care Children's Services. I know I haven't been well, but I would never have hurt him or let any harm come to him. He's gone. There are court proceedings, but he won't be anytime soon home at all. My life is changed forever. My heart hurts. My home is a constant reminder of his absence. I swing from crippling anxiety over him to a raw anger that my little boy has just gone. I have no idea how to carry on without him. He is my world. I've cried constantly since. I stumble from hour to hour. I have flashbacks as to when the police came and took him. It's just too much to cope with, and I'm so sad for him. We've never been apart. He's 8 years old. How do I live without him? It's too much and too painful. I don't know the ins and outs of why the care proceedings have taken place. I don't know what the particulars were regarding why they decided to remove your child. I don't know whether your child is now in foster care or in care whilst they go through child protection proceedings and look at the duty of care to your child, and whether you need to have some help in getting him returned to you. At 8 years old, obviously, I would imagine that social services' primary interest is to make sure that if they can ensure your connection again, that they will do that. And also, I would believe that it is normal practice to make sure that as long as there has been no significant harm, i.e. you have not been a risk to your child, which is saying you've never hurt him, so there has not been anything that would cause and provoke fears around his life and safety, that they will have to give you contact. So I'm not sure whether you're getting that kind of contact, and I'm not sure where you stand in those care proceedings. And even though it's going through the rigmarole of court, etc., to look at what's happening, I'm not really sure of where you are in it. So if you could maybe tell me a little bit more about that, that would be helpful. Child protection is there to ensure that the needs of the child and the wishes of the child are paramount. So even though he's only 8, obviously the relationship that he's had with you will be a solid one, and he will want most likely to be with you. So I guess that this is more about the due diligence that they're doing, and you will know why they have come. The fact that the police came with a social worker probably is more to do with the fact that that's just part of the process a lot of times, because people do get really angry when their children are understandably taken from them. It's a really scary, upsetting experience. So even though it can be really, really awful when a police officer's there and a social worker's there to take your child, ironically, it's not because they think you're a terrible human being who needs arresting. It's just that it's a safeguard for social workers. So try to kind of remove that vision of the police officer being somebody who's there to punish you, and kind of see it that that's more a protective measure, because sometimes it can get very aggressive and hostile in situations when children are removed. It wasn't the case with you. You obviously allowed them to take your son. You're going to have a lot of feelings about him, because he's the one who inevitably is dealing with losing the relationship at this moment in the way that he's used to. So I guess you have to ask yourself some questions about what was it about your relationship with him that led to this situation? Like, what can you own in it? Because I think that's really important. It's not about blame. I think being accountable and responsible for things that happen to us can be really helpful. What is it, when you look and explore what was happening in your parenting experience and responsibilities, that wasn't working right? And how can that be improved? And how can you work with social workers and your son to ensure that that can improve? If there are mental health issues that are very serious and they feel that you're a risk to yourself and therefore you might not be able to at this moment in time take care of him, what kind of provision can be created so that you can spend time that's good with him, whether that be supervised or otherwise? Because this is what's really key. It's less about resolving the big issue right now. The big issue, the overarching one of him coming home, let's just put that on the side at the moment. And instead, let's just look at, okay, what are the ingredients that can take us to those milestones? So you having access to him, you spending time with him, so that you get to build and formulate that relationship safely and with support. So like I said, walking around and crying, it's totally understandable. Feeling like your life is over, it's completely understandable. You adore your child, you've lost him at this moment in time, it feels huge. But that's not going to help you. What's going to help you is strategy. What's going to help you is resolving that you can make efforts and changes to your life and world so that your son can have access with you and to you, and that hopefully that you can work together to a point where it's safe for him to come home and that you get that support. So instead of using that energy to feel desolate and barren and broken, that's not what you need right now. I know it's something that you can feel and it's something that is completely natural, but you want to ask yourself, like, what do I need from this situation? And if you need to get him back, then you need to figure out, okay, what was it that was going on? What can I take responsibility for that I can now see I can adjust? And that's empowering. And then how do I work with the professionals in this life that I'm working with my son to show them that actually I am a safe place for my child? That's where your energy needs to be focused. I know it's overwhelming. I know you're scared, but that's where it needs to be. Any help with feeling imposter syndrome? I started a master's degree, which I won a full fee scholarship. I just feel I don't deserve it, and I'm denying all my exams to the last moment because the idea of failing makes me feel physically ill. Been suffering with flare-ups of bipolar disorder due to the stress of not feeling the worth, the opportunity, as if I'm going to be made out as a fraud. The only people I've ever worked with imposter syndrome are people who are naturally gifted at what they do, and because it's quite easy for them, and other people seem to struggle, they have this imagination that really they're doing something wrong. And actually my job is to help them see that they just found something that they were naturally gifted at. I'm dreadful at most things, and I say that without trying to ask for any sympathy or empathy around it. I'm really bad at around 90% of life, and I'm really great at this. I'm great at communication. So I put all my energy, all of my work energy, and all of my experience energy into this one dynamic. I can bake cakes, but again, only they taste nice. They don't look great. So I don't even get onto Bake Off. What I'm saying is, it's okay to feel great at something that you do and still accept that you're not brilliant at all these other things. Because when you do that, the imposter syndrome dissipates, because you realize that you're just naturally able to do something that other people would find quite difficult, much as other people will be able to do things that you can't do, that they find easy and can't understand why you find difficult. You have found something that you are gifted at. It can be hard to own that. We brought up with this idea that being humble is really good, and you don't want to be arrogant about how great you are. If you were in America, you'd be like, yeah, got the full scholarship. You know, they do videos where the kids get them and everyone's screaming hysterically and like wearing the varsity top that they're going to go to the university for. That's America for you. It's all celebrating one's unique abilities. The UK, it's like, shut up, don't say anything. And like, it's wrong. Like, you have found something that you are not just good at, you excel so efficiently at it that they have given you a fully paid up master's. I mean, that is a big deal. And it's not because you're an imposter, it's because you're impressive. But the only permission that you can give yourself to feel that is when you say, I deserve it. And like I said, instead of saying to yourself, this is something that I shouldn't have been given, say, isn't it amazing that I managed to find something that I'm naturally talented at, that I can work hard at, and that other people see, they reflect me in this moment. Because when you're able to do that, you own it. You literally own it. It's not that you were given something. They didn't give you the masters fully paid. You weren't given it. You earned it. They saw something in you. They don't get it wrong. They never get it wrong. These kind of things are rare, and these kind of things come from somebody who absolutely deserves it. So you need to really take a stand and just accept that. And then with your flare-ups and stress, well, bipolar is going to be impacted on by stress. You know that. So you can sabotage yourself. It's simple to do. Just don't do your exams. That's how you sabotage yourself. But then it's not imposter syndrome. That's about choosing to harm yourself. That's about low self-worth. That's about low self-belief. Not about imposter syndrome. That's about making an active choice to boycott your own success. And you need to ask yourself, when the world has offered you this gift because you're so good at what you do that it's been noticed and it presents you with this opportunity, if you don't take that, if you don't hold it, then you're not allowing yourself to really move through the progress that the universe has decided is right for you. And I truly believe that. You got selected because it's right. You got selected because the universe has moved in that moment. So try to accept it with gracefully, and then also work around the plan. So you know you've got exams coming up. How can you break your day down into manageable chunks where you feel that you're working efficiently and effectively to revise and to connect with what you need to do learning-wise? It's been a tough year. It's been a really tough year. You're not going to feel on your A game. Most of us don't. We've had a lot of leveling as far as our emotions go because we've kind of been stamped on and crushed, and all those highs and anticipated joys that we'd be used to have been really leveled, and it kind of makes you feel a little bit locked down, lethargic, and even coming out of it, you're still probably processing a lot of the trauma. And add to that, you've already got an existing mental health issue, and add to that, you've got the stress of exams. It makes perfect sense that you are struggling a little bit right now, but it's about breathing through it, taking a step back, getting organised, recognising that you don't need to self-sabotage yourself. Instead, you can just be like very willing to go on the journey of success, and you deserve what you're getting. That's key. And remember what I said, the only people I've ever worked with who have imposter syndrome are the people who just don't realise that actually they just found and stumbled on what they were great at. And just because someone else is finding it really difficult, that's because the other person is just more normal and typical in that field, whereas you stand out and find it effortless and easy. Accept that. And definitely speak to your GP if your bipolar feels like it's getting outside of its realms of coping, because you don't want to additionalise your stress with that condition. And I would definitely speak to your university about that as well, because often they've got counselling services that can give you a little bit of extra support, and also they can note that, which is important for special consideration. So my boys have got special consideration for certain things because of what happened to them just over a year and a half ago, going on 2 years now. It's important to kind of get those noted down. How does someone with mental health issues have a relationship? That's a broad question, okay? But let's just look at it on a global level. Someone with mental health issues has a relationship with people because they're the human being that they are and not the diagnosis they've been given. And that can be really hard sometimes to separate. I think that people have got a lot of myths about themselves when they've got a mental illness. Let's take BPD or somebody with schizophrenia. It can be really challenging to kind of think that anybody is going to see past it. But ask yourself this, just ask yourself a question. When have any of you seen someone across the room, thought, they're hot? started talking to them and then been like, what's that? You suffer from depression? I'm out here. It's just not the way that we work. Human beings are drawn to other human beings because they're attracted to them, because of the way that they walk and talk, the way they flick their hair, the laugh they have. There are these absolute numerous variables that create attraction. And even though you may feel debilitated at times by your mental health issues, that's not what love sees. Love sees through all of those issues that you believe about yourself. That's the great thing about love. When it's good love, it's healing love as well. It's a love that can make you feel your best, even at your worst. It's a love that raises you up, even when you feel like you're broken down. So you can have a relationship because it's about a two-way street. It's about someone else reflecting your very best reflection and seeing the best of you, and you allowing that person in. So it's not so much the difficult part of getting into a relationship when you have a mental health issue, but there's often a big problem and boundary when you allow yourself to get into a relationship. Maybe you have abandonment issues, maybe you're afraid of rejection, maybe you think your mental health won't be able to sustain a breakup. And those can be really big boundaries, because if you're not allowing yourself to have that kind of connection, then understandably, how is somebody going to get past that boundary? I mean, some people do. You know, some people really hammer on the door of someone as far as love is concerned and just won't go away until that person finally just gives in. But most people, you know, if you don't have a very open heart and be open to that experience, people won't sustain it. You know, they won't sustain that kind of invite. They won't constantly deal with somebody who doesn't let them in. So you have to ask yourself, is it you who's not allowing people in? And if you are, then you have to be open. I often use that word because I think it's a state of mind. When I've worked with clients who have blockages or have very black and white belief systems, like it's all or nothing, it's everything or nothing, you know, there's kind of, it's either this or it's this and it's nothing in between. It's really black and white thinking. My job is to help them see that the grey area in the middle, the openness, is where the good stuff is. So it's more about saying, I'm this human being, I have a mental health condition, it's part of my technicolor self, it's part of what makes you you, and the person that's meant for you is going to see straight through those things that you think are a problem and see a connection. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but maybe ask yourself, are you open? Do you have to get through some stumbling blocks as far as your own self-worth? Are you concerned that you're unlovable? In which case, how are you exhibiting yourself to other human beings? Because if you don't care for yourself that much, if you don't like yourself that much, we have a problem. Again, people will see through that. Don't get me wrong. There will be people out there who no problem see straight through that. They don't care whether you like yourself or love yourself. They just like you. But you need to be able to reflect yourself efficiently and appropriately, because otherwise you can invite people who aren't that great into your world because you have low expectations. So try to think about those things that I've just said. What are the stumbling blocks for you? What are the blockages? What do you think of yourself? And then when it comes to actually sustaining a relationship with somebody when you have a mental health issue, I think communication is key. And I think honesty and authenticity about the way that you feel and your communication style is so paramount. You have to be able to have a really honest conversation about needs. Human beings in relationships, they expect psychics. They really do. Like, so many people get into these bizarre pitfalls because they want their partner to know how they're feeling. And then when the partner doesn't get it right or doesn't seem to react or doesn't seem to know, they get really pissed off because they're like, if you loved me, you would understand how vulnerable I feel. If you loved me, you'd understand how sad I feel. If you loved me, you'd understand how angry I feel. No, like if you tell me how you feel, then I have a chance to show you how I will respond. If you don't tell me, then why judge me on failing when I didn't actually know there was an issue? So the need in any successful relationship to make it really connect and work is to just be really honest about what we require. Because then if somebody doesn't give us what we need and we've expressed it and we've made it clear and we've told them what we need for them to do to make it better as far as how they can respond and react in the relationship to help soothe those moments, and then they ignore it or they do the opposite, or they're nasty, then we've got a reason to be upset and hurt by it. But until we actually offer them that opportunity and insight into how you feel, we can't judge them for getting it wrong. So communication is also a big part of it, and not being afraid to just acknowledge that as a human being, we're all a bit messy. We're all a bit messy, every single one of us. And there are things that we feel and experience that are painful, and there are ways that we react to the world that are challenging. And being a partner is always one of those things that we have to navigate. And remember, you'd rather be in a relationship with a good person with a mental health issue than be in a relationship with an average human being who doesn't really care that much. You know, a loving person with a mental health issue is still a wonderfully loving person. And certainly, I would say that I've definitely had mental health issues, and it's never been an issue in my relationship, because that's what makes me me. And I think that you all have to feel that way. Every single one of you will have mental health issues. You'll either be experiencing them now, you'll have had them in the past, or you'll have them at some point, because this world is unkind at times. And you'd have to be built of rock and probably a psychopath not to feel it. So we're either waiting in the wings to experience it, or we're in the absolute headlights dealing with it, or we're glancing back at what it felt like. So just be aware that when we think about mental health conditions and mental health issues, there's a vast proportion of society who experience and understand it. One thing I'd say though, is don't define yourself by it. And I know that can be really difficult, particularly if you've got BPD, schizophrenia, schizoid affective disorder, you know, all these lists of ones that can be really challenging at times, you know. But it's not just who you are. Your mental health diagnosis is not definitively you. You are just a tiny part of the sum of your parts is that issue. It may have an impact on areas of your life, but the point is you are all these other things. Like I said, there is a technical vocabulary of who you are personality-wise. That's the bit that you need to amplify, not the mental health issue, because we're not defined by it. I'm not sure if this is relevant for the clinic. We shall see. We shall see in a moment. But I thought I would ask. I'm just finishing my level 3 counselling skills, and I'm inspired to do level 4 and be qualified in 2 years' time. I'm going to do some volunteer work for the Samaritans. Well, there's SOS as well, don't forget that. My training starts in September, and I'm going to start a part-time job doing some support work. It's a good thing to do. It's completely different from what I normally do, which is marketing. But it still seems like a big jump from that to dealing with people, real people. This is a change of career in my late 40s, so I hope I've still got time to learn and be of value in this field. Can you give me any advice on how to upskill and become more competent? I think you've mentioned before that you use an integrative model. I do, and I'm so interested in all aspects, but I feel I've left it too late to start on this path. I've really been inspired by you, and even if all that happens is I volunteer, I know it'll be worthwhile. First off, when I trained in the Advanced Diploma in Counselling, which was at Manchester University before they kind of changed it to the Masters and the PhD, because that's what happened to it in the end, I did my first 2 years at Manchester University surrounded by people in their 40s, 50s and 60s. Honestly, I was the youngest by far. There were 3 of us who were basically under 35. The rest of us, and it was a big course of about 35 people, were over 45 to 50. It was clearly a course where life experience and wisdom was valued. And you can understand that, because when I look back at how I was, and I was like really, I suppose, grown emotionally in lots of ways in my 20s, I always felt like I should be 150 years old and just be allowed to sit in a tent and deal with solutions for people and give my advice. That would be my perfect job, just to live on a commune and be in a tent and people to just come in and like ask me stuff. That would be my perfect job, you know. That's where I'm meant to be. I probably should just have been born sometimes, you know, before Christ. But everybody on that course, it was about this grown knowledge of life experience. So you are actually still at the young age for a lot of people training in therapy. I think it's become a lot more popular in the last 20 years. I think that people have started seeing therapy as more normalized. So younger people have trained because it's become a bit more I suppose, global in our country to talk about therapy and therapy models, but you are probably at the perfect age. So as opposed to being too old or it being a career change that is going to be shocking for you, quite the contrary. Also, I think it's great that you've worked in marketing. That's what therapy is. We're marketing hope. I mean, you have to be a really good salesperson to help people see their best selves. You have to be really committed to that kind of transition. And if you think about marketing projects, that's what you do. You come up with an idea and you take it to fruition and then you send it on its way. And therapy is very much like that. You know, you work in that space with the person or the people, if it's a group work experience, and you're working on these issues, but then you're building them into something sustainable and hopeful and creative. And this relationship that you're going to experience is very much about marketing that hope. That's what we do. I always say that it's almost selling hope. I don't mean as in that people can purchase it. I mean that experience of just like expressing it in a way where people can buy into it. And that is the basis. The integrative model I like because I'm an ethical maverick and I just like throwing things in. That's why I train all the time. I'm always reading, I'm always learning, because I think that you can never learn enough, and therapy models are just burgeoning all the time and people have different ideas, and I'm excited by that. Certainly I've signed up for some training that might not ever happen in the UK, but I'm really into the idea of MDMA training, so methylene dioxymethamphetamine training for people who have got post-traumatic stress disorder. I would love to be involved in that. It's used in the States and you get this intensive therapeutic time with clients where it's about 8 hours and you do it with another practitioner trained. So there are things that I always want to involve and do, and you will. But this is a brilliant time. And it's great that you're going to do your level 4. And it's great that you're going to do the Samaritans. Like I said, look, SOS, they're looking desperately for people. They want people to man their helplines. You can do it at home. So also maybe have a chat with them. You can find them on Twitter. And they're really nice people, all affected by suicide as well. So it can be really helpful and a growing experience to kind of connect with people who've been there and gone through those things. But their volunteers are lovely. I met loads of them at the weekend. So be aware of that. And I would say most of all, the thing about a paradigm in therapy is you'll find the one that fits you. I trained originally in client-centered. It's probably what you're doing as well. So Egan and Rogers, very much around that pure-centric view of the client-centered approach, unconditional positive regard, congruence, you know, those kind of things are really important in that process. But then as you grow into it, you kind of figure out that there are different things that you can do in different ways and you kind of go with yourself. I always used to argue at university that Carl Rogers, for example, wasn't even Rogerian when he was doing the therapy and I was watching him on videos. It was always hilarious because I was like, he's not being client-centered. He's not being Rogerian and he's Rogers. So just be yourself. You'll be fine. But as for any fears that you've got, let them go. It's a perfect time. You've got the whole of your life again. Why would you want to stay in a job that isn't fulfilling you? And like I said, marketing's a great basis for it. Hi Emma, I'm 17 years old and I caught my dad sleeping with a good friend of the family. I don't want to tell my mum as she's going through breast cancer and I don't want to put the pressure on her as she's going through enough. I haven't spoken to my dad since the day I caught them at it. It's really upset me. I don't know what to do. What should I do? Any advice? I can't tell you what to do because that's a big, big piece of advice. And I can't be responsible, obviously, for you making a decision as to whether to tell your mother about your father. However, I would, without doubt, want to have a conversation with your dad if I was you. Parents screw up. Parents fall out of love. Parents have affairs. Parents do all these things because they're human. And it's really hard. At 17 years of age, parents don't feel that human. They're just mum and dad. But they're just like you, but older. And actually often not wiser. And that isn't giving your dad any excuse for his behaviour. It's unacceptable what he's done. It's unacceptable. It's unfair. And it's betrayal. But you need to take some time to decide what that means and feels and looks like for you. And I would definitely have a grown-up conversation with your father. You can't ignore it. You can't not speak to him, because if you don't speak to him, it's going to come out anyway. Because your mum's in the end going to be like, why are you not talking to your dad? And sometimes we do that kind of behavior purposefully. So maybe you're not speaking to your dad on purpose so that your mum sees it as a problem, so that then she provokes your telling her of what's happened, which creates a solution, which is then she knows what's happened. So ask yourself what that process is about. And for me, I think that your father needs to talk to you about this. He needs to explain himself, and ideally he will be the one who speaks to your mother. Because what I do agree with, no doubt, is the fact that your mother is being betrayed, and potentially that is something, particularly as it's a friend of the family, that is going to infect your family experience. So if it's a friend of the family and your mum doesn't know, you're going to have to go to events with that person. They might come to your house to see your mum, and that's going to really impact on your mental health and wellness. But I think right now it's about confronting the issue with your dad. I don't mean in an aggressive way. Confront's probably not the best word, because what I actually mean is you need to have a conversation with him that is going to be challenging. I don't mean confront in a conflictual way, because that won't get you anywhere. But you just need to kind of go and say to him, you know that I know what's happened. You need to explain this to me. And then he might not be willing to, but you can then at that point say, you need to tell my mother what's happening, because this is something that can't be left. I can't unsee this, I can't unfeel this, and I can't pretend that it's not happened. But you can honour him and give him the privilege of allowing him to make that decision. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, this is after my first husband, buried under the patio, it's not really. This is after my first husband had an affair with a close friend of mine. She was a really close friend of mine, really, really close. I really cared for her, I really loved her. And when I found out that he was sleeping with her, it changed my understanding of lots of things. But one of the things that really upset me was that people started to kind of say that they had suspicions, and somebody thought that they'd seen them kissing. And I was like, whoa, like I'd had my suspicions, but man, if you kind of knew, like come and see me. And then I got into a situation one day where I saw something on Facebook that shouldn't have been there, and I linked straight away that somebody I knew was having an affair with somebody else's husband. And I really liked her. But in that moment, I called his wife. Now, he answered the phone, and the consequence was that he called my friend, who realised that I knew. And I then told her she had 24 hours to tell this wife of the guy that she was seeing. And that might seem cruel, but actually it wasn't cruel. It was kind, because it's not acceptable for people to be aware of something happening behind somebody's back without that person being informed. But giving them that leverage, that 24 hours, was something that I think was really helpful. And I'm glad that it happened that way. And, you know, this is life. We have to be authentic to ourselves. So have that conversation with him. Give him the opportunity to have that conversation with your mum. But this isn't about you. And I know that can feel really difficult, because it feels like it's about you. It feels like it's impacting you. But this is about your dad and your mum's relationship. And people do make mistakes, and people do work things out. But equally, your mum needs to be, I guess, party to that experience. Otherwise, she's blind to all this. And you will never be. And it will get to a point, I promise you, where you'll just throw it out there, and it will be in a way that you can't manage as you could now. So take some space about this, speak to your father, and suggest that he has that difficult conversation, and then come back if you need more advice, because it's a really big one. But like I said, maybe think about why you're behaving the way you are around him, like that silent experience, because that's going to build into a scenario where you do explode. And arguably, your father should have manned up by now and come and spoken to you. He hasn't, and we accept that. But maybe you need to have that conversation with him, break the ice, because it's not going to go away. And I am really sorry that you're going through that. 17 is a horrible age to be going through that, particularly after this terrible year. Can you help me? My partner has mental health issues since COVID, up and down every minute of the day. What do I do to help? Well, you've kind of answered that question by the fact that you've got in touch. One of the big things is to accept that you can't heal him, but you can support him. So realistically, the fact that you're asking the question means that you're already compassionate and kind. I guess one of the things that can be really helpful is to act as a motivator. When somebody's depressed, the enemy of depression is motivation. And it's also the hardest thing to get when you're feeling really low. But having a buddy, somebody who can kind of help you plan, get you recharged, make you go out, they're the things that make a big difference. So what can you do with him? What can you do together? Can you both think about a little bit of exercise together? You know, can you get him out of the house? Can you get him to go for a walk? Even if it's just a 15-minute one, can you get him to go on some meditation streams with you? Just put it on when you're in bed at night and just allow yourselves to just de-stress and float away a little bit. Maybe you just need to go to the doctors with him or have a telephone consultation with him or a video consultation with him to talk about him getting a little bit of therapy, or even to look at some medication potentially if that's something that will help him. The main thing is to remember that you're not there to make it better. I think that a lot of people, when their partner's got mental health issues, it's like, how do I heal them? How do I change them? How do I resolve it? But you can't. You've just got to hold their hand whilst they deal with it and let them know that even though they feel like they're drowning, that you've got a safety net and you'll keep holding on. That can make a world of difference to the most challenging of situations. Also, not trying to say things like, it'll be okay when they're in the depths of depression. It's more, that must be really painful for you. I can hear that that's really challenging. You know, acknowledge it and try to be patient. One of the big things with mental health is people lose their patience. I think we've all done it at times with people that we love. We want them to be well. And because we want them to be well and we don't want them to be sad and we are scared for them, when they don't get better, it's really frustrating. But it comes from a place of love. So try to bypass the frustration and try to bypass the impatience and just replace it with compassion and kindness. And when you need a break, just take some time out. Go and have a cup of tea by yourself. Go for a walk by yourself. Take some breaths, you know, look after your mental health. Let's make sure that you're mentally resilient so that you can manage his mental incapacity at times. And that way, together, you'll be in a much better circumstance. So like I said, what can you do with him? Also, anything that can create a state of flow. That might be something as simple as doing a jigsaw puzzle or doing some colouring in or doing some crafting. Things that are quite simple to achieve, but often we don't think about them. And then of course there are apps. You've got Appy, there's loads of free stuff on there. You've got Headspace and Calm, which you pay for, but are great. There are things that you can do that aren't going to be too expensive, but that will make a difference to his mental state. And like I said, if you're really concerned about it, absolutely get those appointments with healthcare providers because they're going to be able to access things that I can't give you. And again, remember that there are things like Anxiety UK, OCD UK, there's Mind, all of these operate helplines. If you can maybe help him to think about having a conversation with somebody who's a volunteer but who's trained, sometimes just that mental unloading and having a conversation about how crappy things are, it can really help to shift. The other thing I'd say is if there are friends around him, people that he hasn't been able to see because of lockdown, try to engage them to come over. Try to get them back in his life because that will help to activate that memory of what life used to be like. We've had a really hard time. Most of us have changed to some degree. I'm not who I was a year ago. I'm definitely not who I was 2 years ago, but a year ago, I'm not who I was. I have a completely different view of the world. I have a completely different view of people. I have a completely different view of what I thought the way that things were. So we've all changed, and sometimes that can really affect anxiety and depression. Like I said, some people, it will have changed for the better, but I think a vast majority of people will all feel changed, you know, for the worse to some degree, and we're going to have to heal. So remember that as well. And remember that you've been there with him during this period, and that means that you're probably wounded as well. So lots of self-care. Pete has put a question up to test my eyesight, I believe. I mean, I can read it, Pete, but it's so tiny, literally. No, it's number 3. Hi, Emma. I realised out of therapy, I walked out of therapy. Honestly, it's like, you know, when you go to the opticians and there's just like the tiny little row at the bottom, when your kid's having their eye tested, you're just really having you're trying to get as far back in the room just to try and beat them. Yeah, I can do this. Am I the only person who did that? Maybe. I got a call yesterday to talk about my therapy that's coming up in the near future. I've waited ages for it. Feeling nervous, yet keen to work through past trauma. Any advice? Just go in there and just be open, really open. I mean it. Just go in and be like, this is who I am, this is how I feel, this is what I want to get from therapy. And I mean that, I definitely do that. Get in there, know your plan. You're excited because it is exciting. You're about to go on a journey of self-discovery, and you're also going to go on a journey of exploration and resolve. They're really exciting things, and you'll have waited a long time, so it makes sense that you're excited. And it's great to feel excited about therapy. Nerves are excitement, just felt a little bit negatively. So let's turn it into excitement, and then it will feel so much more positive. But the best advice I can give you when you go into therapy, just be ready to express yourself fully and be ready to ask for what you need. So you can walk in and be like, what I think therapy is really important about for me is I need to work past my sexual abuse as a child. Let's take that example. Or I need to figure out my attachment issues because my relationships with my parents are problematic. Whatever it is, kind of be ready to have that conversation, because that makes it even a better experience for you. And it also gives you a real help as far as the therapist is concerned. They're suddenly understanding what it is that you're looking to achieve. You don't have to do that. You can just go in and feel around and see how it is, and you'll figure it forward and it will work great. But the main thing is be excited about it. Hi Emma, my 11-year-old daughter doesn't want to go to school as she's getting bullied by a few girls in her class. One of the girls started to hit her, pushed her to the ground and pulled her hair. She's terrified. She started to self-harm and make herself sick. I've spoken to the school about it, but they don't seem to be pursuing the situation. Any further advice on how to manage this situation? I mean, the fact that the school aren't doing anything is a real concern. They have an anti-bullying policy and they don't have a right to not be concerned. So step one, I'm like a mama bear. So as a school, I'm very fortunate. The school that my youngest son, who hasn't been going back to school because he's just not been in the space, and they've been really understanding and have let him stay at home and just going a couple of days a week. That's because, I've gone in and had those conversations. I think you need to do that. You need to go in and speak to them, or at least have a telephone conversation with them and be like, no, this isn't good enough. My child is suffering mentally because of the fact that she's reacting to a really hostile situation in school. Also, with respect, if your kid's getting punched by a child, do not feel that you can't ring the police. That is physical assault, and I don't care how old the kid is, that needs warning. And also, it will mean that the children recognise that this is going to be taken seriously. So your daughter and you could make a complaint to the police. I know they're kids, but I don't care. If they're being physically abusive, then somebody needs to give them a really stern talking to. And it works wonders when the police do that. Don't get me wrong, they're not going to give them a criminal record or anything, but it might help to just make it clear that you're going to pursue this relentlessly unless things change. Equally, the LEA, the local education authority, if you're not feeling that the school is taking you seriously, the local education authority will. Because arguably, you would have cause to sue the school at some point if your child's mental health was so impacted on that she felt beyond able to actually have an education, and you started being litigious in this situation, and they want to avoid all that. So I would be very firm, and I would be like, no, what is the plan? How is this going to shift and change? How are you going to deal with these girls? And I would even arguably say that if that's happening outside of school, like on Snapchat or on any of the social media platforms, like take screenshots, make sure that you consider that that's taken to school and the school is informed. It might be outside of school, but it still relates to an in-school experience. With your daughter, we've got a different issue though. The fact that she's self-harming and making herself sick, they are big, big concerns. Now, you could, if you wanted to, think about removing her entirely from that school. It's something that I've suggested many times to parents. If your child does not feel that they can stay there, they feel so afraid, they've not got a friendship network, things aren't working out for them, you can remove her. She doesn't need to stay there. You've got grounds for it. There'll be spaces at other schools, and that might mean that she has a new start, but that's an option. If it comes down to the fact that she wants to stay at that school, but she wants this resolving, you're still going to have to, one, manage the school by being a lot firmer. They can't be disinterested. You make them interested. You're mama, and that's it. Then secondly, you're in a situation where you've got a girl who's self-harming and got an eating disorder at this point. They're big things and they're going to need some help. So I don't know whether school has a counsellor or a pastoral support that can work with her, but I would definitely go and speak to your GP. Early intervention with eating disorders and self-harm is key. There is an app called Calm Harm, which can be helpful for people who are harmers. So have a look at that. And I will include eating disorders as harm because it's certainly self-harm. But I think that your daughter needs some professional help, really. Even though this may only be related to the initial onset of bullying and you can see that direct connection, the point is that is a very severe reaction. Eating disorders and self-harm are really, really imperative that we get them the support early on. So this may pass very quickly, it may, and that would be great, but do not wait for that to happen. Speak to your doctor, get a referral for CAMHS. Yes, it's going to take quite a long time for you to get an appointment, but let's worst case scenario this. Let's just worst case scenario it. And she doesn't get better, you're going to be really grateful at the point that that occurs, right? So don't wait. They have specialised teams for young people. I know that people will be like, well, it didn't work for me and it didn't work for my kid. There's always people who it won't work for. There's always people who have bad experiences, but there are also lots of people who have good experiences, and you need to get some kind of professional support there. Because when we're talking about bulimia and we're talking about self-harm at 11 years of age, that's really important. And also, it would be really helpful if you could just message me and let me know how quickly this came on, because there are other things that can impact and mean that children start acting out in certain ways that I'm learning about at the moment that I didn't necessarily understand a few years ago. So maybe you could message me about that as well, just to kind of understand if I can identify whether there's something more physical going on as well. But definitely speak to your GP. I hope everybody is okay this week. I'm going to end my questions in a second just because of the fact that it's now 28 minutes past. Thanks for joining me as ever. Those of you who've joined late, just saying you can get my app, Appy, on the Play and App Store, so go and download it. It's improving all the time, although it's slowly killing me. Slowly killing me. I hope that everybody's having a decent week right now. I know things are bloody hard at the moment, and I know that nothing feels fixed, does it? Everything still feels like there is nothing certain. And for the human condition, that's just crappy. I'm not even going to pretend. You know, it's really bloody hard. And for some of you who've been financially struggling for the last, what feels like 100 years, it's not good enough, but it is the way it is, and it's offensive and wrong. And for those of you who are struggling with your mental health and haven't been able to access services and are reading shitty reports saying that, you know, depression's better than it's ever been, I just feel really sorry that you're getting that kind of rubbish peddled in front of you, and just know that it's not true. Just know that it's not true. Understand that when people let out journals, and this is something we don't talk about, but when people write studies, very often they're completely biased because of who they're funded by. When you see people putting out studies that go against the actual reality of what you're seeing around you, don't look at the study and go, "Ooh, I must be wrong." You're not wrong. The study has been created with bias purposefully and willfully to support a narrative that isn't real. But don't let that make you feel that your mental health is sliding where everybody else is getting better. It's never been as bad. So just know that and acknowledge it and make peace with that and understand that you're normal. And everyone is going through a really big battle to some degree because of what's happened in the past year. And the few that are lucky, I'm very glad that they're lucky, but most of us have not been. So just to hear that and acknowledge it, because I think that we're not doing that enough. And it's certainly not getting out on mainstream media how desperate things are. And just be aware that when you see those kind of things in the Daily Mail, it's not real. It doesn't matter how much they print and how much they cover. We all know how people are feeling. And unless we acknowledge it, we can't process it. And if we can't process it, we can't make progress with it. And mental health services have never been hammered enough like this. The Royal College of Psychiatrists said that they're just like splitting at the seams. You know, this isn't because people in the mental health sector in the NHS aren't trying desperately to meet needs. It's that they cannot. It's that they cannot. The government have managed to write magic checks for a lot of people, but mental health still doesn't seem to have received it. So as I've said, if you are feeling things like suicidal, this charity is amazing. You can call them anytime. There's obviously the Samaritans, there's mine, there's all of those, but don't sit and think that you can't access some kind of help. It is there, but you might have to go to a charity, but understand that whilst waiting lists are long, it's still worth getting on them. But mental health is struggling and you're not wrong for feeling that. All right, chaps, I will see you again next time. Take care.